Hello guys and gals and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be going over a Sorceress item. I finally got my Sorceress leveled up. And that one is the staff called the Staff of Lam Esen. I'm just kidding. It's the Staff of Lam Esen. The Staff of Lam Esen is literally the same thing as the Tome of Lam Esen that you get from Diablo 2. So it's, I guess, made by the same guy. The the Staff of Lam Esen is actually pretty interesting. And as we go over it, I think you'll understand why. So first off, it can roll between Sacred and Ancestral, and it does drop in World Tier 3 and World Tier 4. It is a staff, so a two-handed staff, which of course means that it has the 52.5% damage to crowd-controlled enemies on it. This particular staff has 40.5% lightning, which does vary between 21 to 42%, 52.5% damage to close, which varies between 49.5 to 70.5, 69% damage to injured enemies, which varies between 63 and 105%, and then lucky hit up to a 5% chance to restore primary resource, a 36% primary resource, which is pretty high, but goes all the way up from 21 to 42%. Which is kind of ridiculous. The main effect on this particular item is that the charge bolts will now pierce, but deal less damage. The damage that they deal less is either 35% to 25% less damage. Now, honestly, the really cool thing about this staff is that the piercing effect is worth it, and I'll show it off in a little bit. It does have some flavor text on it, which is also known as the Great Staff of the Old Religion. This powerful relic is one of only a small handful of Skatsimi artifacts that have survived to this day, Barrett's Book of Implements. Now, as you can obviously tell, this particular staff is based around the charged bolt skill. And if you're not using charged bolts, the staff isn't going to be much use to you. Now, granted, it does have lightning damage, but it's also based around close damage too, which is also part of an issue with the staff in general. With charged bolts, you want to be close, but with some other skills, you don't necessarily want to be close. It depends on the character that you're trying to build. With this particular staff, though, combining it with other effects, like for instance, the aspect of static cling, which gives you a 300% longer duration on your charge bolts, and then also having the ability to attract two enemies, and also combining it with things like Raiment of the Infinite, which give you the ability to teleport in and draw all the enemies to you and stun them. There's a lot of very interesting things that can be done with this particular staff. In fact, once you get it all set up, the staff actually has some very interesting damage output, and you can do things like, I'll see if I can find a nice big group. I can do things like this, which is where you basically jump into the middle of a group and the entire group gets sucked in and killed in like no time. Let's see if I can find a really nice thick group of monsters. Events sometimes don't pay off there. But as you cast your charge bolts, what you're going to notice is, number one, they travel through the enemy and out the other side, which is absolutely great. Number two, you can utilize them in a myriad of ways to get multiple novas off. This is also something that happens with the charge bolts, which is really interesting. So when 3 or more charge bolts hit a target, you get a nova that comes out. It's actually part of the skill. The nova that comes out is usually only a one-time deal, because you can only cast 5 bolts, which means you only have 3 of those bolts can ever hit a target at the same time, which basically means you can only get 1 nova at any given moment. But because of the fact that the charge bolts will now pierce the targets, it allows for the novas to happen multiple times. So as you can see here, hitting an enemy at least 3 times with the same cast of charge bolts releases a lightning nova, dealing 1,878 to 2,296. The other interesting thing here is that when combined with other such effects on the skill tree, like for instance, the chance to stun enemies, which is right here, convulsions, lucky hit, shock steals have a chance to stun enemies, and utilizing the enchantment on the charge bolts ability, which is the hitting an enemy with charge bolts. When you stun an enemy, there's a 48% chance to release 3 charge bolts from them. The 3 charge bolts can also pierce targets, And it gets kind of insane because when utilizing something like Raiment of the Infinite, which stuns everything that it pulls in, multiple charge bolts will be released upon the teleport entry, so to speak, and then those charge bolts can pass through the enemy, hitting other enemies, which in turn does things like this. And you end up with a lot of dead monsters really, really fast. I've actually having a lot of fun with the charge bolt ability because it just the enchantment for charge bolt, the charge bolts themselves, they work very well in a functional like build. Once you have everything set up, they just do massive amounts of damage. I wish I could find a much larger group of monsters to show this off because it's really cool when it really gets a pumping. When you really get it pumping with like a really big dense group of monsters, it's pretty sick. And these are like the smallest little non-dense groups of monsters I've ever seen. But as you can see, because it can pierce, because the charge bolts are piercing, because the charge bolts are actually seeking out targets, like it basically just goes through all of them, does tons of novas. Every single charge bolt will hit usually monsters multiple times before it goes through. And it's really the pierce effect, I think, that it's the most powerful thing here. Although I do really enjoy having a 300% longer duration on the charge bolts. If they didn't pierce, they wouldn't be nearly as effective as they are now. Now, the unfortunate side effect of them piercing is also that they do less damage. So that means that, in general, when you're fighting bosses, when you're fighting monsters that are very tough, like single target creatures, that's where things tend to not be as amazing. But as you can see, the amount of damage that I can put out, like, to a large group of monsters, it's pretty cool. This character is only level 68, so these monsters are still higher level than me. But it is so far been a very impressive build. I also utilize the enchantment on the teleport, and the reason why I'm doing this is so that I can have multiple stuns, basically. So every single time I teleport, I can stun everything within range, and every time I stun everything within range, I can get more charge bolts. And because my charge bolts pierce, yada yada yada, it ends up a whole lot of additional damage. So I basically have up to 4 teleports depending on my boots at that particular time. But because you can get 4 teleport charges on your boots once you get them all upgraded. I don't have a +4 at the moment yet. But this means that you can teleport across the world, essentially willy-nilly, going like this. And just annihilation, annihilation. And then once you're out of teleport charges, of course, you gotta wait until your next teleport charge comes up. But during that time period, you can always just spam your abilities. To make things even crazier with this, you can combine in unstable currents. Now, the reason why unstable currents work so well with this, and also lightning sphere, by the way, which is also part of unstable currents, is because it has a chance of stunning enemies when critically striking, as well as a lot of the skills, the lightning skills, have stuns. There's also a passive that you can get in the lightning tree that basically just makes it so that there is a % chance that monsters will just be stunned. So, where is that one? I can't even remember where the hell that one is now. Which is the convulsions I was showing off earlier. So it's just a lucky hit that monsters will be potentially stunned. So when you're utilizing unstable currents with the teleport in, things get even absolutely more insane. Let me see if I can find another group of monsters, and I'll tag unstable currents before I hop in, and things will just get dumb stupid. Now, this charge bolts doesn't do like the most amazing against single target monsters, but I'll be danged if it doesn't like absolutely annihilate, for the most part, any groups of monsters. And I've actually been in dungeons where I'm playing against monsters that are like level 90 plus with this character so far. And I've actually been pleasantly surprised that not only was I able to actually kill monsters with Charge Bolt, going against monsters that were sometimes like 20 levels higher than myself, but I could annihilate the entire pack, which was freaking glorious. Now, the damage output on Charge Bolts is a little pathetic by comparison to some other skills, but it's also an ability that hits 5 times. Novas, potentially releases more charge bolts. It's definitely one of those abilities that's more of like an exponent kind of damage than a hard hit itself. So like the entire goal behind it seems to be having multiple smaller hits, which are all coalescing to equal a larger, greater goal. Because you have 5 charged bolts that are all hitting the target. They can pierce through. If 3 of them hit a target, they cast a Nova. Any of them can stun, which can potentially emit more charged bolts, which can potentially emit another Nova, which potentially has the possibility of dishing out damage every time you stun an enemy, which is this one right here, Shocking Impact. And by the time you're done, there's just like literally like hundreds of damage damage effects going off on the screen at any given time, to the point where sometimes I've actually even kind of died laughing with Charge Bolt, because like I'll literally teleport into a group of monsters, start dishing out my damage, and you'll just see so many numbers appearing on the screen that I don't even know how the hell you're ever supposed to actually like keep track of that many damage numbers all happening at once. And yeah, they're not like the highest, most ridiculous damage numbers, but there's literally like freaking, sometimes I swear it's like 1,000 numbers on the screen at one time, and I don't even understand, because sometimes the numbers just don't even make any sense. Like, I guess if you were to really calculate out how many times a monster is hit with this particular ability, like, I guess it does get kind of insane. I mean, just running it on a calculator real quick, just for the fun of it. Of course, one thing I do not excel at is single target so far. We'll figure that out eventually. But if we run that on a calculator, like, you take the number of hits that you're dishing out, which is,
I need time to prepare that.
of course, Mr. Spider wants to play, which is 5 charge bolts initially, right? Plus a Nova that can hit everything within range. Okay, the 5 charge bolts can pierce, which definitely means that they can hit multiple targets. So if you have a large pack of monsters, say 20 deep, so you're talking about like 5 charge bolts times 20 monsters, which is about 100 hits, plus another 100 hits when the Nova goes off, right? But the problem is that the Nova can potentially go off multiple times, so each one of those charge bolts can potentially equal up to, let's say, over 20 monsters. Even if it only hits half of them for Novas, that's still 10 Novas in a group of 20 monsters. So you're looking at, what is that? That's 100 plus 1,000, basically, individual hits, which is kind of insane if you think about it, because it's 10 individual Novas going off that are all hitting 20 monsters within that radius, and then each one of those lightning hits can potentially trigger an additional stun, which can potentially trigger more, obviously, charged bolts, which can potentially trigger more Novas, which is, like, I'm not even joking when I say sometimes I see like 1,000 or more damage numbers on the screen, because it's not even it's actually not even an exaggeration, it's an underestimation. Because when you're in a very large, dense pack of monsters and you teleport in with your Raiment of the Infinite, you stun everything within range, you can potentially make even more bolts. So let me see if I can really work this out on the calculator, because it gets even more insane when you deal with a teleport. So if I teleport into a group of monsters, and there's 20 monsters, I now stun half of them, okay? So I have a 48% chance, sorry, I stun all of them, and I have a 48% chance to dish out charge bolts, right? So 50, let's just round it to 50%. So 20 monsters, 50%, so then we have 10 times 3 charge bolts coming out, which is 30. Plus my initial cast of 5, which will come out initially when I teleport in, because I'm going to teleport in and hit the charge bolt button, right? So that's 35 charge bolts, which, if you divide that by 3, is 11.66, multiplied by all 20 monsters, because that's about 11 Novas, and you're talking about 233 hits from those novas, and then each one of those can potentially spawn more bolts, and it just gets dumb. It gets absolutely dumb, and it just keeps getting dumber and dumber. And I actually have a clip that I'm going to post probably in a little bit. I'm not going to post it in this one because I don't know. Maybe you know what? Maybe I could actually. Let's see if I could pull that clip up real quick. It could be fun to pull up during the middle of this real quick. Basically last night I had one of these such events happen, and it was just like ridiculous multiple explosions. Let's see if this is it. I think this is it right here. Hold on. Let me make sure it's at the highest quality. You guys can have the volume too. How about that? Of not all the monsters. Chase them in the other direction. You see this? Do you see this ridiculousness? And this was when I was level 58, by the way. So these are like really low numbers, and I didn't even have a good staff yet. So this is a example of a dense pack of monsters when you are utilizing this type of thing. And the numbers that are appearing on the screen are just so constant and literally just popping up over top of each other to the point where you can't even read the numbers. This is one of the bigger ones that literally comes up where I start getting crits, overpowers, all sorts of things. They start overlapping over everything else, and I literally get to the point where I'm just kind of like giggling to myself because the number of individual hits that comes from this stupid staff, because of the piercing, because of the extra effects, because of all the other stuff going on, like, it's just absolutely insane. Let me play it at full speed here real quick so you can really get a good feel for it. The other direction. Look at all these explosions. Is that not absolute? Let's do that again. Remember, chase them in the direction of not all the monsters. Chase them in the other direction. Look at all these explosions. And you start to really understand what I'm talking about when I say, like, it's almost incalculable the number of times that you can literally hit with this staff. Like, this staff is the center focal point of all of this craziness. Because the charge bolts are piercing, because they're hitting multiple targets, because they're doing the novas, because the novas are triggering more charge bolts, because the more charge bolts are triggering more novas, because you're also getting the additional stun damage, you're also getting the additional stuns, which are then triggering more charge bolts, which are then triggering more novas, and it's a ridiculous circular craziness that just doesn't make any sense, but it does tons of damage, and oh my god, it's fun. Anyway, I've already talked for 17 minutes, or 18 minutes on this particular item, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're talking about the staff of Liam Neeson. And as always, keep watching.